Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus told his disciples this parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out at dawn to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with them for the usual daily wage, he sent them into the vineyard. Going out about 9 o'clock, the landowner saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You too go into my vineyard, and I will give you what is just." So they went off. And he went out again around noon, and around 3 o'clock did likewise. Going out about 5 o'clock, the landowner found others standing around, and he said to them, "Why do you stand here idle all day?" They answered, "Because no one has hired us." He said to them, "You too go into the vineyard." When it was evening, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Summon the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and ending with the first." When those who had started about 5 o'clock came, each received the usual daily wage. So when the first came, they thought that they would receive more, but each of them also got the usual wage. And on receiving it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, "These last ones worked only an hour, and you have made them equal to us, who bore the day's burden and the heat." He said to one of them in reply, "My friend, I am not cheating you. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what is yours and go. What if I wish to give the last one the same as you? Or am I not free to do as I wish with my own money? Are you envious because I am generous? Thus the last be first, and the first will be last." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Welcome, sister. The pulpit is yours.
Thank you for your gracious welcome. My name is Sister Anna Tansitz. I'm a sister servant of the Immaculate Heart of Mary from Scranton, Pennsylvania. That's where our mother house is. There's another group of our sisters out of Philadelphia and out of Monroe, Michigan. According to church law, we got split our way back in the 1800s, but we're really the same community. Father mentioned last night that he was in Syracuse, and our present president of our religious congregation is Sister Ellen Maroney, and she's from Syracuse. She went to Most Holy Trinity. I think you have to say most, don't you? Yes, yeah. And her mother used to run a bar in Syracuse, and it was right near. She used to tell the story. I lived with her for 5 years. She used to tell the story. It was the only corner in the United States where the light is upside down because it was Irish, and the green one is on the top. And every time the road people tried to turn it back, somebody would come out of the bar and turn it back up. So they just decided to leave it that way. I think it was called Tipperary Hill or something. You all know about that. Yeah. And my principal ministry for the past 25 years has been preaching parish missions and retreats with Father Peter all over the United States and Canada. Your Syracuse Diocesan Commission Cooperative asked me to speak to you on behalf of our sister missionaries in Sequani, Peru. We were coming back from a parish mission in Sacramento, and I was in line to get on the plane, and my phone rang, and I'm thinking, this is in, I think, 2012 or something like that.
13.
And I thought, Sister Ann Monica, what's she calling me for? She says, would you be willing to speak for the missions in the Syracuse Diocese? Because you live in the Albany Diocese, and that's the closest we have sisters. So I said, sure, I'll be fine. And I've been doing it ever since. So even during this pandemic, they called me in June and said, will you go? And I said, Holland Patton? Where is that? Father Peter looked it up on the map and found our way here. So we live in a town that's about as big as Holland Patton. It's called Middleburg, New York. And in praying over this weekend's scriptures, this hymn came to mind. Now, while Father Peter plays it, see if you can name it.
Come to me,
all who labor and heavy burden, and I shall give you rest. Take up my yoke and learn from me, for I am meek and humble of heart, and you'll find rest for your souls. Yes, my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. All the scriptures of today reflect on God's generosity and the abundance of the gifts that He has given us to deal with what comes up in our everyday lives. In the Gospel of Matthew, the landowner in the parable says, "Are you upset because I'm generous?" In the book of the prophet Isaiah, that was read so beautifully by your lector, God says, "My thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways." The responsorial hymn we heard in the psalm that was sung so beautifully, "The Lord is near to all who call upon Him," anybody who calls upon the Lord. And the Lord is also good and compassionate toward all His works, toward all of creation. And then the letter of Paul to the Philippians tells us, "Conduct yourselves in a way worthy of the gospel of Christ." So it's how we live our lives. Over 50 years ago, when the Scranton IHM sisters asked themselves corporately, how can we live the gospel with our brothers and sisters around the world instead of just in the schools where we teach? And they discerned to share Jesus' love for the life of the world with the people of Peru. And the sisters would have been there for over 50 years, but about 25 years ago, or maybe 26 now, the bishop asked the sisters who were in Peru at the time if one of them would establish a small parish on the edge of the town of Sequani, on the southern Andes Mountains, 11,000 feet up. That's over 2 miles above sea level. It takes 2 days to journey up there from Lima, because you have to kind of rest halfway up for 2 days to let your lungs get accustomed to the rarefied air. Presently, Sister Eileen administers the parish there. They've been there for over 25 years. with Sister Ancilla. Sister Ancilla taught high school in New York City, which prepared her for going to Peru. And she was an only child, so she knew she had to stay and take care of her mother. As soon as her mother died, she said, I've always wanted to go to Peru, and off to Peru she went at 70 years old. And she's still there, doing fine. And Sister Norma, one of our Peruvian sisters, is up in Sequani. When the sisters first arrived there, they noticed that many parents from the outlying little communities around in the Andes Mountains rented a room in town so that their sons could stay in town during the week and go to high school nearby in the town. But they also noticed that no girls were included in this plan. So the sisters secured grant money and purchased a house and furniture so the girls could also stay with the sisters during the week and enroll in the secondary schools and get a secondary education. Each girl pays the equivalent of $7 a month, but no one is refused if that amount is too much for them to pay. Of course, it really doesn't cover all of the cost. So once a year, each of the boarders, the sisters just take care of the boarders and after school time, they get a chance to donate standing meat. Now, when Sister Eileen told me this, she could see the puzzled look on my face, and she said, do you know what standing meat is? And I said, no. This is what standing meat is. So every 2 weeks, somebody else gets a turn to come back with a lamb. And then they use that lamb for meat for the girls for 2 weeks. Other things are also purchased in the market to supplement the girls' diet. The girls go home on Friday, and most return back to the boarding place so that they can go to school on Sunday evening. Some of them walk 5 miles each way, 5 hours each way, so that they can go to school. On Saturday afternoon, the teenagers help with the catechesis in the various neighborhoods of the parish. Usually they're the 7th and 8th graders who work with the younger children. Most adults are not accustomed to weekly liturgies because the small Andean villages that they came from originally, Mass was only celebrated once a year. The priest only got there once a year. Consequently, those at the Saturday Mass are mostly children and their dogs. Sister Eileen said they take their dogs wherever they go, so the Saturday Mass has lots of dogs in it too. They come early for Saturday Mass, very early, so they can play in the meeting room where the sisters have Legos, lots of them. When Sister Eileen returns to Peru from her annual visit up here to the United States to visit her family, which she couldn't do this year because there's no flying out of Peru. When she does return, her suitcase is actually only half full of clothes. The other half is mostly Legos, games, and such. Since most adults don't go to Mass, Eileen also shares the scriptures of the week with the police on Monday morning in the church before they go to work for the week. One week when they had something especially hard to do before them that week, and they were all in their riot gear, one of them came up to her and very sheepishly said, "Sister, please don't blow out that candle. Leave the candle lit all day in front of the Blessed Sacrament so we return safely to our families tonight." Now, that's how things were when the sisters first went there. But how are things going in Peru these days during the pandemic? I thought it best to summarize in Sister Eileen's own words from her updatings in our IHM newsletters. We usually get one a month on the internet. And in June's letter, she wrote a summary of what they did down there for Lent. This is how it goes. Remember, this is Sister Eileen talking, not me. During this awful coronavirus epidemic, many Peruvians feel bad that they couldn't participate in the Holy Week processions. The Archbishop of Lima told them that they were personally living the passion of Christ in their lives, as they were restricted in so many ways from choosing where they go and what they do, as well as seeing many, many of their people suffer and die. Usually, we, the sisters in Sequani, are at early morning mass, but now there's been a longer time to pray and meditate by the window in my room. Each day I observe the poor people who receive meals from the soup kitchens, pushing and pulling the carts that collect the garbage in our town, taking it to a central place where a truck picks it up. They begin work at 3 a.m. and are required to participate in this if they want to be fed. To me, it's a modern example of carrying one's cross. Other Andean communities, people from other Andean communities walk by carrying heavy loads of corn or potatoes or even slaughtered sheep on their backs to sell in the market, and then return home lugging supplies that they bought in Sequani. Normally, trucks would take them back to their village, but now no traffic is allowed. Another way of the cross for them. We've had a better than average corn and lima bean harvest from our garden this year, and we're sharing some with the poor families we know. A few weeks ago, Sister Ancilla saw 4 police standing on the corner. She went over to them to ask them permission to take our car out so that we could make food deliveries to the people we knew. Ancilla gave them each a chocolate bar, saying to them, "Don't throw the wrapper on the street." And they laughed and replied, "Yes, sister." A little humor goes a long way to allowing the sisters to distribute food. At the end of Lent, Ancilla got a brazenly wonderful idea to hang pictures of the Stations of the Cross on the outside wall of our house. Sister Norma got a ladder and hung them high enough so they would be out of reach. But one night, somebody lifted the 5th station. We tried to put a charitable interpretation on the thievery, saying maybe the person was inspired by Simon's kindness, or worse yet, maybe they needed some kindling to start the fire to cook breakfast. I was able to do a new one, and it stayed intact until Good Friday. Currently, there's an Alleluia banner hanging out of the 2nd floor window of our convent to celebrate Easter. We were able to tune into Mass on Facebook after a few glitches at the beginning. At first, the images were sideways on our laptop, but rather than lie on the floor to watch it and get a better perspective of it, we chose to close our eyes and just listen. Other Masses from Toronto and South Dakota came through to Peru, but now they can tune into local Masses. At 5 p.m. most days, they play cards. 6, they watch Mass online. And at 7, they eat dinner with lots of corn and lima beans. They're being very creative. For fear that the church altar wine would turn to vinegar while it wasn't being used all these months, they went up and they took it down to the house, and they use it now and then for a little nightcap. We visited families again last week and felt terrible that a crippled woman and her 3 children hadn't eaten in 3 days. So Sister Eileen called Caritas, which is like an international Catholic charities, and she's one of the few people in town that has a phone, so she called and asked them if they could help with staples. She said they arrived within an hour with a pickup truck and some extra food in the back, besides for the crippled woman and her 3 children. It didn't take long for a few other women who were passing by asked if their families could also be included in the food distribution, and they were. Sister Eileen says it was a modern-day experience of the multiplication of the loaves and fishes, and concludes with this: so we're all in this together as the quarantine continues. The next time, it's July, there was a paragraph about the feast of Corpus Christi in the Peruvian Andes, which is a big, big celebration down there. The Toyota truck wound its way very slowly and around the rutted dirt road from Sequani to the top of the mountain overlooking the city. It had to go slowly because it was carrying a very precious passenger, Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament, in a monstrance affixed to a pedestal, held fast by one of the priests who was riding with the bishop. No procession through the streets was possible because of COVID-19. The virus had spread throughout all 4 provinces that make up the prelature of Sequani. That's kind of a subdivision of the diocese. When arriving at the top of the mountain, the bishop prayed over and blessed in the 4 directions where the provinces of the prelature were located, and concluded with benediction. The event was carried on Facebook, TV, and radio to all the people of the region that could get service, thus enabling the 3 sisters in Sequani to share in that episode. And from the September newsletter, she updated us when she said, all our Peruvian IHM associates and their families are affected by the pandemic that's sweeping our world. Yet they're still finding ways to carry out their ministries in these days of quarantine and extreme caution and loss. Many of the people there would help Sister doing the training in the outlying areas to train the catechists, because they speak, I think it's Quechua, and they don't speak Spanish up there. They speak the native Indian language. And so they miss these IHM associates. We have IHM associates also in the United States. I think there's about 300 sisters, and there's about 200 some IHM associates, laymen and women like yourselves, that do their own ministry, some of them in their own place, and some of them work with the sisters. So the IHM associates in Peru, I think there's about 15 of them, they have adapted their approach to ministry as they continue to work closely with the IHM sisters in Sequani. And even though they ministered in extreme conditions and circumstances before COVID-19, now it's all the more challenging. We are all called to be evangelists. And once you have been to the well of the baptismal font, like the young person from the parish who was baptized yesterday before the Saturday Mass, you no longer have a choice if you will be an evangelist. An evangelist is someone who good newses others. The only choice you have once you're baptized is how will you do it? And only you and God know how that will be. It might be to be a good parent, it might be to help with the religious education, it might be to do all kinds of things. So I want to offer some practical ways you can respond to God's call and invite you to choose how you are going to do it. First of all, you can contribute generously to the second collection. That's why I'm here, after all. To enable the missionaries like Sister Eileen, Sister Ancilla, and Sister Norma to do their job and share the good news that Christ still feeds the hungry and walks with the oppressed. Without your financial support, it would be impossible for them to continue this work. Or second, you can pray for missionaries, priests, religious brothers and sisters, and laymen and women like yourselves who live in Peru and give their lives as IHM associates to spread the love and mercy of Christ. And our sisters in Sequani have volunteers from 2 different European countries that serve with them a year at a time. So they have 2 volunteers with them. One's from Germany, and I forget where the other one is from. And they stay with them a year at a time and help them do their things down there. So we're all called to be missionaries by our baptism, whether we give to the missions by going there, or whether we go to the missions by giving. We can all respond to that call through our prayer, our choices for justice, or our financial support. In the name of the IHM sisters who serve on the mountaintops in Peru, I thank you for your contributions and your prayers. Today you heard the scriptures remind you of God's generous and abundant gifts to you to meet each day's needs. You also share his life with others in your own daily living out of your own baptism. And I thank you for being partners with the sisters in their sowing the seeds of the good news in the Andes. May you hear Jesus singing these words of today's scriptures in your hearts.